Good morning, everyone. I'm Kimberly Sulfridge with the Kids Money Project. I hope you're having a fantastic day so far. I am here going live with Kimberly Evans, which I'll explain why that's kind of funny here in just a minute.
Yes.
But yeah, we are here talking some generational wealth this morning. So Kimberly, how are you doing this morning?
I am doing amazing. I am considering after the week we had last week, I'll take it all at this
No,
point. I'm good.
no joke. We're in a little different place than we were this time last week, aren't we?
Yes, indeed. So that's a good thing.
Yes, absolutely. But no, I figured I'd kind of mention why the name thing is kind of funny. So Kimberly and I met, I'm guessing it's probably been 3 or 4 years ago, long before COVID, back when
Yep.
we actually got out places. And we actually met at a networking event, and we were, kind of going through introducing ourselves, doing our little 30-minute or 30-second elevator pitch. And I was kind of sitting in a corner, and there were three of us there, all named Kimberly. And then when it got to, you were actually the last of the three of us, and you said your name, Kimberly Evans. And I just started kind of laughing because for 35 years, I was Kimberly Evans. Evans was my maiden name.
Yep.
So, and I have to tell you, when you text me or call me, it is the freakiest thing when it pops up on my phone, because I'm like, what? How am I
Why am
calling
I
you?
texting myself?
Exactly. Every time it happens, I kind of just, what? And it takes about a second or two to, I know who that is.
Exactly.
Uh,
Exactly.
well, thank you so much for coming and joining us this morning. I cannot tell you how excited I am to have you here. And when I kind of think of this topic, you are immediately who comes to mind for me. And I kind of think of you as the guru in this area. So,
Thank you.
but why don't you first, just so we can kind of get to know who you are, maybe just give us a quick rundown, a little intro to yourself, what you do, and why you do it, why you got into it.
Oh, sure. So, as Kimberly said, my name is Kimberly Evans. And I did have to change your name in my contacts just so I didn't think I was calling and texting myself as well. Because I think I originally put it in there as Kimberly Evans Sulfridge, but it only shows the Kimberly Evans part. And I was like, wait, what's happening? So, but thank you for having me today. I love having these conversations because you and I both share the passion for the fact that this kind of information and education is so critically important. So, I am the president and CEO of Purpose Consulting. Purpose Consulting is literally named for what I was purposed to do, not necessarily what I was chosen to do. My plan for my career was that I was going to argue drug legislation and constitutional law on Capitol Hill. I live in Frisco, Texas. So first thing, apparently geography is not my strongest suit. But the other part of it is that what my gift is, I'm an attorney with an MBA, and my true gift is really taking very complicated things and just explaining them in English. And so Purpose Consulting is really named because my purpose is really to make sure people understand things well enough to make good decisions for them and their families. It's really all about quality of life. And as I've grown in my career, what I've noticed when I was in corporate America, my background has been in financial services for about 30 years at this point. But what I noticed is that what Wall Street understands, what DC understands, and what corporations understand compared to what everybody that's living and making decisions and paying bills understand are two different things.
Yes.
And I started bridging that gap in 2006 and then was blessed enough to really start running Purpose Consulting full time in 2015. So we will be 15 years old this year. So that's pretty
Nice.
exciting. But what it really is I want families, individuals, and business owners to understand things like, why do I have so much month left at the end of my money? Why is it that I'm not saving and reaching the goals that I want? How do I build a better life for my kids? And what does that look like? How do I do that? What information and decisions do I need to make? And that's really my specialty, just sustainability and profitability in your personal life and in your professional life is really critical. So where I start is people know about the global economy. People know about the national economy. Let's talk about your personal economy. So we spend time with our clients setting up personal economy performance plans. And that literally looks at your entire financial picture, says, where have you been? Where are you now? And where do you want to go? And then we bring together the resources and the options for you to do that.
I love that explanation, just that kind of that personal economy. I love that term because I think we turn on the news, we hear about everything that's going on in the world and nationwide and even a little bit local and stuff, but a lot of times we just kind of forget to think about how that really affects us and our plan for our future. And so, if we spend as much time planning our future financially as we did, planning a vacation or something like that, we'd probably all be in a lot better shape.
Indeed, for sure. But I think we live in a society where everything is microwavable and it's easier to reflect outward, right? We
Yes.
almost deflect from, well, if I don't have to worry about mine, I'll just worry about everything going on in DC. Here's the
Right.
problem. Things that happen at a state and local level are going to affect you far faster
Yes.
than would be what's going on in DC at the national level. We just don't connect those dots. And I think a lot of times it's because nobody's just said, by the way, it's okay for you to think about you and yours first, because
Right.
all the rest of that really doesn't matter if you're not okay at home. If your personal household, your household economy, which is what the definition of a personal economy is, if that's not working, the rest of it really doesn't matter. And I
Absolutely.
think that's what people forget. People just want to eat, feed their families, take care of their kids, leave a better future. Most of us aren't really worried about all the stuff we hear at the international level. We can't do anything about it anyway. So it's entertaining, maybe newsworthy.
Right.
Um, but at the end of the day, can we change or impact any of that? We cannot, but we can impact our own households.
Yes, no, I dead on. Absolutely. So, well, why don't we just kind of dive in and let's talk about what generational wealth actually is? Because I think wealth, just that term, gets a negative connotation. Money in general oftentimes gets a negative connotation. You hear terms like money's the root of all evil and things like that. And
Mhm.
that's absolutely not the truth. And so, the term wealth gets lumped in with that. And so we think of it as, you know, I think a lot of people think that, well, I can never be wealthy. I don't make enough money. I'll never be wealthy. And again, that's absolutely not true. And
Right.
so maybe just explain what wealth is and what actual generational wealth is.
So the first thing I really want to suggest to everybody is to stop thinking about wealth as a dollar figure.
Mhm.
Wealth is not a number. Wealth is a state of being. It is a way you're living your life. And I love to have this conversation because I can take somebody who makes $30,000 and somebody who makes $150,000. And oftentimes the person making $30,000 a year is happier and feels wealthier than the people making $150,000 a year. And people say, well, how is that possible? It's because we individually get to decide, what does wealth mean? What does that definition look like? And so most of us can decide, do we want to live in peace and joy or do we want to be miserable? Some people decide they want to be miserable. And I'll use this example. Some people say, well, I want to be a millionaire. And I'm like, okay, great. Why? And they go, what do you mean, why? And I'm like, why do you want to be a millionaire? Well, I mean, what is that? Well, because doesn't everybody want to be a millionaire? No, not really. Most
Right.
people, excuse me, most people are okay paying all their bills, taking vacations, and just living a great life.
Mhm.
Does that require you to have $1 million? I don't know. Let's find out. Let's ask. But what about being wealthy in your mind? What about being wealthy physically? What about being wealthy in the presence of your family or in your spiritual walk? Your life, the wealth that you get to define is really around, back to what I said earlier, quality of life. So
Mhm.
what does that look like? Like I would tell you, I've got to be one of the wealthiest people in the world. And people might say, well, how much money do you have? That's not why I'm wealthy. I'm wealthy because I have an amazing life and
Mhm.
I enjoy every bit of it. So getting people to that point is important. But here's what we'll talk about, because we all know realistically people want to understand the money piece of their wealth. I just want you to understand that's just one of the pillars of your wealth, but it does go in part of the conversation. But what does that look like for you? For
Mhm.
example, generational wealth would mean I want the generations behind me to be better off. So I'm a Christian. So, the Bible says, first issue, the Bible says that money is not the root of all evil. The love of money is the root of all evil.
Yes.
And it also says that a wise man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. So
Mhm.
when we're talking about generational wealth, we're talking about, what do you plan to leave for the generations behind you? What does that look like and how are you setting them up? And what does that quality of life look like for them because you were here and a part of their life? And that's completely different than just, I need to leave people a bunch of money. You need
Right.
to leave people a whole lot of things in order to be able to say you passed on generational wealth.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I think one of the things about generational wealth that I read about that I honestly did not realize it actually fit into the definition of it. But not only is it, the passing of, assets and money essentially, but it's also passing on the knowledge of financial, how to manage it, how to understand it. And I just actually just before we started, I came across kind of an interesting statistic on it, that generational wealth, so one generation removed, so that second generation, oftentimes about 70% gets lost in that generation. And then if you move to the third generation, it goes down to 90%. So essentially you kind of lost it completely by that point. And I would be willing to bet, I don't know for sure, but I would be willing to bet that has to do with the fact that that generation did not know how to manage it. They did not know how to work that money, have it work for them. They did not know what to do with it. They just spent it. And it money will disappear easily that way. And
Easily.
so not understanding it. And so generational wealth is not only passing that, but passing the knowledge on how to use that, how to have it work for you. And so that's obviously my big thing given what I do. So
Which is why you and I were so connected in these conversations, because your focus is teaching parents how to have those conversations with their children, and
mhm,
how do their children then understand it. And your own story is kind of a testament to that,
yes.
because you were taught how to do it, so now you can teach others how to do it. And I do think you're spot on. I don't have the statistics either, but I do believe that it's because one generation doesn't teach the next generation to teach the next generation,
Mhm,
and what ends up happening, it gets lost. One
mhm,
of the things you will notice about these generational wealthy families that you hear about is because they were taught, or they figured out, then they taught the kids behind them, and those kids then taught the kids behind them, and those kids
yes.
taught the kids behind them. So that is way you keep it going, and you protect it and grow it, and you keep track of what's going on currently to make that happen.
Mhm,
And I think the knowledge is key. One of the things that I have in our trust, where our will is located, my will specifically says that at my funeral, they don't get to talk about anything that I accomplished or anything that I owned. They only get to speak about what I taught them and what they plan to teach someone else. And that is
mhm.
laid out specifically because at the end of the day, I'm not going to be here to enjoy any of those accolades, because once I'm not
Right.
here, I'm not here. What
Right.
I am going to be able to leave, though, is the story of, yeah, my auntie told me this, or my mom said this, or my mom and dad taught us this. And then they're teaching their kids, and their kids will say, well, why do you know that? Well, my mom and dad taught it to us.
Mhm.
And then we've created that legacy. We've created generational wealth of wisdom and knowledge and the assets. It all goes hand in hand. The assets alone are not sufficient enough to keep it going.
Absolutely. No, I could not agree with you more on that. Just, and I love that you put that actually, in writing. It's right
Mhm.
there. And because you're right, you're not here to enjoy those accolades at that point. And that's not what you're about. You're more about what you're leaving behind. And it's, again, it's not the material objects and the money, it's the teachings that you did during that time. And, you know, I can speak personally on this because that's what my mother did for me. And, I only got my mother, I was 25 when she passed. And so, it's one of those things that 25 years was massive. And unfortunately, even at 25, I did not realize the impact of the gift that she gave me. I understood that I had something that most people didn't have, and I did recognize that, but I did not understand just how much of an impact that would have through the rest of my life. And so, thank you, mom, for doing that for me. And so that's what I'm hoping to kind of get out there for parents to understand that this is a gift that they can give their kids that will actually last them their entire lifetime. And it's it's just a phenomenal gift. Trust me on this one.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I think what's interesting about your story specifically is that you recognize that and you share it, but you also recognize that more people than not did not get that same background. And so part of the reason
yes.
they're struggling is our parents are great parents and they mean well. We've all come from
Mhm.
probably a lot of hardworking parents, but they can't teach you something they don't know themselves
Yes.
because nobody taught it to them. So then you find yourselves going, at some point in time, somebody has to decide to make the difference. and to make a change.
Yes.
And for me and my family, I'm one of the first people to graduate from college and graduate from law school and have 2 graduate degrees and that kind of thing. But I also worked 3 jobs to get through college, and although I graduated valedictorian and although I had scholarships, I still had to work a lot to
Yes.
get through that. And although, we hear the statement all the time, right? Well, the harder you work for something, the more you appreciate it. I will suggest to you that there is a line between appreciation and misery.
Yes.
And when you are working way too hard to get something accomplished, it's miserable. Working for something is expected. That's okay.
Right.
But that line, so I don't want the children behind me to go through that. And they didn't. Our daughters, we have 4 kids. The 2 older ones are done with college already. They didn't have to go through that miserable experience through college. They didn't have to work that hard. Their kids, obviously, because we'll be their grandparents, surely aren't going to work that hard because we've already set them up for success. But it
Right.
really makes a difference. So at some point in time, even if you didn't have it originally, it'd be great that you the one started. Let us teach you how to do that. Let us teach you how to teach your kids, and in the process, we'll make sure you're successful and that generational wealth exists after you are not here.
Mhm. Well, one of the things, and I don't want to make this go long and long because we could sit here for hours, the two of
We
us.
could, yes.
And is there something that you would suggest might be a good place to actually start? Because to me, this is a topic, like how to actually start doing, getting involved in building a generational wealth. That's a topic all on its own, but is there something that you might suggest that might be a good starting place? And then we'll have you come back and we'll talk about it more. But what might be a good place to kind of start?
So I would say the very first thing to do with parents, and whether it's with me or somebody else, sit down and just have a financial review. They're free, they don't cost anything. It's just a conversation. And you can really then, and it's more personal than here we're kind of talking in generalities and telling
Right.
stories. But we sit down and talk about. So the first step would be sit down, talk to somebody, find out where you've been, where you are, where you want to go, then discover the options that are available that plus then realize this is an ongoing process. So for like all of our clients, they stay with us forever. We are working on this continually because it's not a one size fits all.
Right.
The next thing I would talk about is let's look at your personal economy performance plan. That includes your budget because most people have no idea where their money is going.
Yes.
So we'll sit down there and do that. And then we just set some goals and we start working on them. But the first thing is just to get started. Sit down and start having the conversation. If you're single, you need to be planning around yourself, whether you get married later or not. If you are married, what does that look like for you and your family? And if you have children, what do you want for them? I have not met a single parent yet that says, I want my kids to suffer and be worse off than me. Never heard that. So that would be the very first thing I would say. And then we just plan from there. And then if you'll have me back again, as you mentioned, we'll just talk about different steps, different kind of conversations, what goes into all this. It's far easier than people might imagine.
It really is, and I think that's where there's a lot of misconception here is, I think it can feel very overwhelming for those that may not understand it because, like we've talked about, this was not a topic of conversation that they grew up with, and now as adults, they're trying to figure it out in the midst of trying to handle their life and kids and balance everything else that life goes in, and of course, right now we're in the middle of a pandemic, so it's just that much more. And
Mhm.
but I think we tend to overcomplicate what it is because a lot of people just don't know. And
Mhm.
so it's a matter about having these conversations. And it's literally as simple as making some choices.
Mhm.
And, I'm not saying it's going to be easy to do it, especially if you're almost having to deprogram yourself in a lot of ways of things that you've been doing that might be some bad habits that, there's a reason your money is going faster than you're bringing it in because you may have some bad habits that you've developed over time. And so, there's choices to be made. It's not necessarily going to be easy, but it is as easy as making choices. And like you said, sitting down and figuring out what it is that you actually want and prioritizing that is a best place to start with that. Because then it may be easier to make that decision when it comes up because you go, oh, but you know what? I've got this plan and this is what I'm doing and I want to do this. So, this suddenly doesn't seem as important. Or, maybe those
Right.
cups of coffee just, you make your own versus going to Starbucks every single day or something like that, whatever it might be. And so yeah, absolutely. This is a conversation I definitely want to continue for sure. And so, I appreciate what all you have kind of given us today and kind of give us a little overview of what it is and where to start. But yes, I would love to have you back and we can talk about this a little more. And if I'm not mistaken, you kind of work throughout the country. Is that correct?
Correct. We
Okay.
have a national reach and we do everything virtual so anybody can join us. And we host events called Money 101. And it's not about products, it's literally just about, did you know this is how this works in our country?
Yes.
And by the time you leave a Money 101, you have everything you need to know to get started. We talk about $5 a day. But before we end, this is something I really want to leave everybody with. And then we can talk about this in detail. There's two myths that people believe in this country. And part of the problem is because we are an information overload. Now
Yes.
we are a society where you can get information about everything. It can contradict the information, and the person who wrote the information contradicts the information. It's just information overload. But there's two fundamental principles everybody needs to understand. It is not true that it takes money to make money.
Yes.
Small amounts of money over a period of time will actually reach your financial goals. The other
Absolutely.
myth is I need high rates of return to make it work. Again, small interest rates over a period of time will actually get you to your financial goals. So if you're stuck in the trap of, well, I don't have anything to get started with, don't buy into that myth. Do not get sucked into that mindset because it will hold you back forever. And it's simply just not true.
Yes. Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree with you more. They couldn't, very, very well said. So, well, thank you so much for coming and joining us today. And like I said, we will definitely have you back because your head is just full of so much knowledge that we need to get out there. And you mentioned Money 101. I have sat through one of those, and even having a very good knowledge base in this because of my mother, I know I sat through that and went, oh, this is fantastic that somebody's actually doing this. Because that was the biggest thing when I kind of realized I had something that most people didn't have, is I couldn't figure out why most people didn't have this. That it took a little longer for me to figure out that piece of the puzzle. And
Right.
so the fact that y'all are doing this, I love it. And I want to make sure we get that out there. So we're actually going to list a lot of your events. I know you have the Money 101s that you do, and you also have Wine, Women, and Wealth that you do. And that's another one I've sat through. I love, and again, it's very educational. It's not a product hard sell type situation at all. It's they're giving you knowledge, and this is the stuff that we're talking about that you need to have a base on. And so we'll get that out there. And Kimberly's contact information is on our website and everything. And obviously, you can also reach her in the group and everything like that. Drop her a message or something like that. I know she will be happy to talk to you and go over some of these things. So, reach out if you have questions. Drop them in the comments, and we'll make sure they get answered. So, thank you, Kimberly, for joining us today, and we look forward to
Absolutely.
having you back very soon.
Well, thanks for having me, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Well, everybody have a great day, and we will see you here soon.
Bye,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone.